Her own parents sold her like livestock for being unable to bear children. But when a widowed Viking warrior saw her cry, he knew he had found the mother his three small children desperately needed. In the harsh lands of Jorvik, where winter winds carved suffering into every soul and hopes froze like ice on bare branches, lived Astrid Bjornsdottir, a woman of 22 winters whose name meant divine strength in Old Norse, but whose light had been extinguished by years of humiliation and whispered curses. Her raven-black hair fell in waves to her waist like a midnight waterfall, and her honey-colored eyes held a sorrow so profound it seemed to have roots reaching into her very soul. The Bjornstead estate stretched beneath the merciless northern sky like an open wound upon the frozen earth. It was the year 947 A.D., and Astrid walked through the timber halls of the longhouse with her head bowed, carrying the unbearable weight of a fate she had never chosen. 6 years of marriage to Eric Thorson, 6 years of broken promises, accusing stares, and venomous whispers that followed her like hungry wolves stalking wounded prey. "Nothing again," murmured old Helga the Vulva, seer healer, after examining her that October morning. The words fell upon Astrid like hammer blows on an anvil. The crone looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt that had become all too familiar. "6 winters, child. If your womb has not quickened in 6 winters, the gods have closed it forever. You are cursed, barren as winter soil." Eric had been waiting in the courtyard, pacing like a caged bear. When Helga emerged with confirmation of what the entire household feared, the man struck a wooden post with his fist so hard the timber cracked like breaking bones. "A woman who cannot bear sons is no woman," he roared, his voice echoing across the frozen valley. "She is cursed by the gods, fit only for thrall's work and shame." Astrid felt every word pierce her heart like iron arrows. She stood frozen in the doorway, watching as her husband stormed toward the stables, his cloak billowing behind him like dark wings of rejection. She knew he would not return that night, nor many nights after. Eric had found comfort in the eager arms of Sigrid, the blacksmith's buxom daughter, a girl of merely 17 winters, whose wide hips and full breasts promised the sons and heirs that Astrid's body cruelly denied him. The family's shame, the days that followed, were a slow torture more cruel than any blade. Eric's family, who had grudgingly accepted her when she brought a modest dowry, now treated her as if she were a ghost haunting their hall, invisible, unwanted, cursed. Her mother-in-law, Lady Ragnhild, a bitter woman of 60 winters, whose tongue was sharper than any Viking sword, began speaking openly about dissolving the marriage bond and sending Astrid back to her father's house in disgrace. "My son needs strong sons to carry his name to Valhalla," she declared loudly, while drinking mead in the great hall, deliberately ensuring Astrid could hear every venomous word as she served the morning meal. "He cannot waste his prime years bound to a barren woman. The gods themselves have marked her as unworthy." But the cruelest betrayal, the wound that cut deepest into Astrid's already shattered heart, came from the two people who should have loved her unconditionally: her own parents. The sale. Bjorn and Gyda Thorsdottir arrived at the Bjornstead estate on a bitterly cold Wednesday morning, their worn cart pulled by an old horse that looked as defeated as Astrid felt. Astrid's heart had leaped with desperate hope when she saw them approaching. Surely they had come to take her home, to shelter her from the shame and rejection, to remind her that she still had worth in someone's eyes. How tragically wrong she was. "Daughter," her father said without meeting her eyes, his weathered face a mask of shame and desperation, We must speak." They sat beneath a bare oak tree, away from the curious ears of servants and thralls. Bjorn was a poor farmer who had fought his entire life against starvation and debt, and the deep lines carved into his face told the story of every failed harvest, every harsh winter survived by the thinnest of margins. "Astrid," her mother began, her voice trembling like leaves before a storm, "you know we love you. But times are impossibly hard at the farm. The spring floods destroyed our entire crop, and we owe 3 months' rent to the Jarl. If we cannot pay, we will lose everything. Our land, our home, our very lives." Astrid felt a terrible coldness spreading through her body like ice water in her veins. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered, though in the deepest pit of her stomach she already knew, already understood the unspeakable truth. Her father finally raised his eyes, and what she saw there, the shame, the desperation, the guilt, made her want to vomit. We met a man, a wealthy trader from the northern territories named Olaf Grimson. He's a widower who needs a woman to manage his household and care for his servants. No children required." "I don't understand," Astrid lied, because understanding would make it real. "He offered us 300 silver pieces," her mother continued, tears now streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Enough silver to save our land, pay our debts, and start fresh. And you could start over too, daughter. Far from here, where no one knows of your curse, where you wouldn't have to bear the shame anymore." Astrid stood slowly, the frozen world tilting beneath her feet. "You're selling me," she said, her voice eerily calm despite the hurricane of betrayal raging in her chest. "Your own daughter, like livestock at market. Is that correct?" "It's not like that," her father protested weakly, but his words crumbled into dust before they could take form. "It's an opportunity," her mother insisted desperately. "You would be like a respected housekeeper. Olaf is a decent man, a widower with no children. He would treat you well, give you a roof, food, safety." But Astrid was no longer listening. She walked away from them like a woman in a nightmare, moving through a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. Her own parents, the people who had brought her into this world, who had once cradled her and sung lullabies and promised to always protect her, had just put a price on her pain. 300 pieces of silver. That was what her life, her dignity, her worth amounted to in the eyes of those who claimed to love her. The merchant arrives. That same afternoon, Olaf Grimson arrived at the Bjornstead estate like a raven descending on a corpse. He was a man of perhaps 50 winters, corpulent, with graying hair and small, calculating eyes that evaluated everything as if it were merchandise to be appraised and purchased. He wore expensive furs despite the cold season, and carried a walking stick with a silver wolf head handle that he struck against the frozen ground as he spoke, each tap like a nail being driven into Astrid's coffin. "So this is the woman," he said, circling Astrid like a hunter examining wounded prey. His eyes traveled over her body with an assessment that made her skin crawl. She looked strong, healthy, hands not too rough for a farm girl. Can she read? "A little," Bjorn answered for her, as if Astrid had suddenly lost the ability to speak for herself. "She knows her runes and can keep simple accounts." "Good, good. I'll need someone to manage the household ledgers in my trading post." Olaf walked a full circle around Astrid, studying her from every angle like a horse trader at market. "And it's confirmed. She cannot bear children." The question sliced through the frozen air like an axe through flesh. Astrid felt something inside her die, but she kept her head raised with the last shred of dignity she possessed. "Yes, master," her mother whispered, unable to look at her daughter. "The vulva confirmed it. But she is very hard-working, very obedient." "Even better," Olaf grunted with satisfaction. "I don't want complications in my household. Fertile women bring problems, suitors, scandals, bastard children demanding inheritance. This one will be perfect for my needs." He reached into his heavy cloak and withdrew a leather purse, counting out exactly 300 silver pieces onto the wooden table. The metallic clink of each coin falling echoed like death bells in the terrible silence. Bjorn and Gita stared at the silver with expressions of relief and shame warring on their faces, relief that their desperate poverty was solved, shame at the price they had paid for that solution. "The bargain is struck," Olaf declared, tucking away the parchment bill of sale he had prepared. "The woman comes with me at dawn tomorrow. Tell her to bring only what she can carry. In my house, she will have everything she requires." The night of despair. That night, Astrid packed her meager possessions into a leather satchel with trembling hand that seemed to belong to someone else. 2 plain dresses, her wool cloak, the small wooden runestones her grandmother had given her before dying, a comb carved from bone. Each item she touched seemed to whisper goodbye, as if they knew they would never return to this place. Her mother entered the small chamber without knocking, eyes swollen from weeping. "Astrid, daughter, you must understand." "There is nothing to understand, mother," Astrid interrupted without turning around. "You sold me. It is that simple. I am no longer your daughter. I am merchandise. 300 silver pieces worth of flesh and labor. One day you will forgive us," Gita whispered, choking on her tears. "One day you will understand we did this out of love." Astrid turned then, and her mother stepped back from the arctic coldness in her daughter's honey-colored eyes. "Love cannot be sold, mother. What you did today has no name in any language spoken by civilized people." At dawn the next morning, as frost painted the world in silver death, Astrid climbed into Olaf Grimsson's trading cart without looking back. Her parents stood in the doorway of the longhouse, but she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. The merchant cracked his whip, and the horses lurched forward, carrying her toward a fate she feared more than death itself. The journey into darkness. The 3-day journey to Olaf's trading settlement in the far northern territories was a descent into a frozen hell. As they traveled, the landscape gradually transformed from familiar farmlands into wild, untamed wilderness. Towering pine forests dark as nightmares, mountains that scraped the belly of the sky, frozen rivers that looked like scars carved by the gods themselves. Olaf Grimsson talked constantly, his words painting a picture of Astrid's new life that grew darker with each passing mile. She would rise before dawn to prepare all meals, clean the large trading house from top to bottom, wash all clothing and linens, serve any guests or trading partners who visited, manage the household accounts. And when he deemed it necessary, he said this part with a smile that made her blood run cold, she would keep him company at night so he wouldn't feel the loneliness of widowhood. Those final words were delivered with a leer that left no doubt about their true meaning. Astrid understood then, with horrifying clarity, the complete nature of her situation. She wasn't a housekeeper, she was a slave. A woman purchased to serve every need, every whim, every dark desire of her owner. And because she was barren, cursed by the gods and rejected even by her own blood, no one would ever defend her. No one would ever say she deserved better. Her inability to bear children had stripped her of every protection, every right, every shred of human dignity. The trading post. When they finally arrived at Olaf's settlement, Astrid's heart sank even further into despair. The trading post sat on the edge of Viking territory, where Norwegian merchants came to trade with the fierce independent clans who still lived by the old ways, refusing to bend knee to the Christian kings spreading from the south. The house was large but cold, a timber structure with a thatched roof and small windows that let in little light. Inside, everything was dark wood and shadows, smelling of old smoke and loneliness, and something darker she couldn't name. "This is your new home," Olaf announced, dropping her satchel on the floor of what would be her tiny chamber, barely large enough for a sleeping pallet and a small chest. "You will sleep here when I don't require your presence elsewhere." The meaning was unmistakable. That first month was a nightmare of endless labor and crushing loneliness. Astrid worked from before sunrise until long after sunset. Cooking elaborate meals Olaf barely touched. Scrubbing floors that never seemed clean enough, washing clothing in the icy river until her hands bled and her fingers went numb. And at night, when Olaf's heavy footsteps approached her tiny chamber, she would close her eyes and force her mind to flee to distant places, anywhere but the present moment, anywhere but the reality of what her life had become. She was not beaten. She was not starved. But she was utterly alone, utterly trapped, utterly hopeless, until the day the Viking came to trade. The warrior's first visit. It was a gray morning in early spring when Astrid heard the sound that would change her life forever. The thunder of hooves approaching, followed by male voices speaking in a dialect she could barely understand. She peered through the small kitchen window and saw them, 3 Viking warriors on horseback, their long hair and beards marking them as men from the old clans. They wore fur cloaks and carried weapons openly, axes and swords that gleamed in the weak sunlight. But it was the lead rider who captured her attention completely. He was a man of perhaps 30 winters, tall and powerfully built, with hair the color of dark honey that fell past his shoulders. His face was weathered by wind and battle, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of winter ice. A scar ran from his left temple to his cheek, giving him a dangerous appearance. But it was his eyes that struck her, sad eyes, ancient eyes, eyes that had seen too much loss. This was Ragnar Eriksson, though Astrid didn't know his name yet. All she knew was that when those ice-blue eyes briefly met hers through the window, she felt something stir in her chest that she thought had died forever. Something like hope. Olaf greeted the Vikings with the oily enthusiasm of a merchant who saw only profit in every interaction. "Ragnar Eriksson! Welcome, welcome! I have the amber you requested, and the iron tools from the southern forges." The warriors dismounted and entered the trading house, their presence filling the space with an energy that seemed to make the very walls hold their breath. Astrid served them mead and bread with trembling hands, keeping her eyes downcast, as Olaf had taught her. But she could feel Ragnar's gaze on her, not with the predatory assessment Olaf used, but with something else, something that felt almost like recognition. The trading took hours. Ragnar and his men were exchanging furs, amber, and walrus ivory for iron tools, weapons, and precious salt. During the negotiations, Astrid moved quietly through the room, refilling cups and clearing plates, trying to be invisible. Until she dropped a clay cup. It shattered on the floor with a crash that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Astrid fell to her knees immediately, frantically gathering the broken pieces with shaking hands, knowing what would come next. Olaf's rage was swift and brutal. "Clumsy fool!" he roared, striking her across the face with the back of his hand, a blow that sent her sprawling onto the sharp pottery shards. Blood immediately bloomed on her palms where the broken clay cut deep. "I apologize, honored guests," Olaf said smoothly, as if hitting a woman was simply an unremarkable part of hospitality. "The girl is usually more careful." "Enough!" The single word came from Ragnar, spoken quietly but with such absolute authority that Olaf fell silent immediately. The Viking warrior rose to his full, imposing height and crossed the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside Astrid and, with surprisingly gentle hands, helped her to her feet. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone looked at her as if she were a person rather than property. "You're hurt," Ragnar said in accented but clear Norwegian. He pulled a clean cloth from his belt and wrapped it carefully around her bleeding hand. His touch was so gentle it made tears spring to her eyes. "She's just a clumsy servant," Olaf tried to explain with forced joviality. "Nothing to concern yourself with, friend." "This woman is terrified," Ragnar interrupted, his ice-blue eyes now fixed on the merchant with an intensity that made Olaf take an involuntary step backward. "And those are fresh bruises on her arms. Old ones, too. How long has she been in your service?" "That's my business," Olaf began. "How long?" Ragnar's hand moved almost unconsciously to the axe at his belt. Olaf swallowed hard, recognizing the danger he was in. Viking warriors were protected by ancient laws of hospitality, but those same laws would allow Ragnar to seek justice for witnessing abuse. 3 months, the merchant admitted. "I purchased her from her parents. Legally, I have the documents." Purchased. The word came out like a curse. Ragnar's jaw tightened visibly. "You bought a human being. Like livestock. It's legal under Norwegian law, not under Viking law," Ragnar said coldly. "Among my people, slavery exists, yes. But slaves are prisoners of war or criminals paying debt, not women sold by their own families like cattle at market." He turned his attention back to Astrid, and his voice gentled. "What is your name?" Astrid hesitated, so accustomed to being invisible that being directly addressed felt surreal. "Astrid, Lord. Astrid Bjorn's daughter." "Why did your family sell you, Astrid Bjorn's daughter?" The shame burned through her like fire, but something in his eyes, something kind, something that saw her as human, made her speak the truth. "I am barren, Lord. 6 years of marriage and my womb never quickened. My husband cast me out in shame. My parents were drowning in debt. I was worth more sold than kept." Silence fell like fresh snow. Ragnar's warriors exchanged glances, their expressions showing disgust, not at Astrid, but at the cruelty of her fate. "You have children, Ragnar," one of his companions said quietly in their Norse dialect, which Astrid barely understood. 3 little ones who need a mother's hand. And this woman. Ragnar held up a hand, silencing his friend. He studied Astrid for a long moment, and she felt as if he were looking past her broken exterior to something deeper, something true. Finally, he turned back to Olaf. "I want to purchase her." The negotiation. The words hung in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. Olaf's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, calculation, greed. "She's not for sale. I paid good silver for her, and she's trained to my household." "Everything is for sale, merchant," Ragnar interrupted flatly. "That's the first rule of trading, is it not? You paid 300 silver pieces. I'll give you $500. Astrid's heart stopped. 500 pieces of silver? That was a fortune. Enough to buy a small farm, enough to live comfortably for years. But Olaf's greed was legendary, and he sensed opportunity. "She's worth more than that to me. She knows my household, knows my routines. To train another would take months. 1,000 silver pieces." Ragnar's warriors stirred, hands moving toward weapons. 1,000 pieces was an insult, a price meant to provoke rather than negotiate. But Ragnar simply smiled, a cold, dangerous smile that didn't reach his ice-blue eyes. "I'm not giving you silver, merchant." He turned and walked to where his trading goods were piled near the door. From among the bundles of furs and amber, he pulled out a single item and carried it back. It was a sword, but not just any sword. Even Astrid, who knew nothing of weapons, could see this was something extraordinary. The blade gleamed like captured lightning, with patterns in the metal that seemed to flow like water. The hilt was wrapped in leather, with a pommel of pure silver worked into the shape of a wolf's head. "This is Fenris' tooth," Ragnar said quietly, "forged by the master smith Volund Ironhand himself, using the pattern welding technique known only to 3 smiths in all the northern territories. The steel was folded 500 times and quenched in the blood of a white wolf. The silver pommel alone is worth 300 pieces." He held the sword up, and even in the dim light of the trading house, it seemed to glow with an inner fire. "This sword is worth 2,000 silver pieces, perhaps more. With it, you could buy protection from any warrior, respect from any jarl, fear from any enemy. Men have killed for lesser blades." Olaf's eyes had gone wide with naked greed. His hand reached out unconsciously toward the magnificent weapon. "I'm offering you Fenris' tooth," Ragnar continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "in exchange for this woman. A blade worth a fortune, for a person you treat as if she has none. Seems like good trading to me." The merchant's hand trembled as he touched the sword's hilt, feeling the perfect balance, the deadly beauty of the craftsmanship. Astrid could see the war happening behind his eyes, his pride fighting against his greed, his desire to retain his property, battling his lust for the weapon. Greed won. It always did, with men like Olaf Grimsson. "Done," he said hoarsely. "The sword for the woman." The moment of choice, Os. Ragnar turned to Astrid, and she saw something unexpected in his expression. Respect. He was offering her a choice, she realized. He wasn't simply taking her from one owner to another. "Astrid Bjornsdottir," he said formally, "my name is Ragnar Eriksson, warrior of the Ravensfjord clan. I live in the northern territories with my 3 children, who lost their mother 2 winters past. I need someone to help care for them, to help manage my household." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I'm not buying you as a slave or a servant. I'm offering you a place in my home, a position of respect. You would be free to leave if you wished, though the wilderness is dangerous alone. You would eat at my table, sleep in proper quarters, and be treated as—" He hesitated, then continued, "as family deserves to be treated." Astrid's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. This couldn't be real. Life didn't give second chances to worthless, barren women. The gods didn't suddenly smile on those they had cursed. "Wait," she whispered. "Why would you trade a fortune for someone like me?" Ragnar's scarred face softened. "Because when I looked at you, I saw something that reminded me of my late wife in her final days, that same look of someone whose spirit is being slowly crushed, but refuses to fully break. And because my children need someone who understands what it means to suffer, who knows how to be gentle because the world has been cruel." He extended his hand toward her, not demanding, not commanding, but offering. "Will you come with me, Astrid Bjorn's daughter? Will you give both of us a chance at something better than what we've known?" For a long moment, Astrid stared at his outstretched hand. She thought of everything that had brought her to this moment: the 6 years of barren shame, her husband's rejection, her parents' betrayal, Olaf's abuse, every wound, every humiliation, every moment she had wished for death rather than another day of suffering. And then she thought of 3 motherless children somewhere in the wild northern territories, probably crying themselves to sleep at night, probably aching for a gentle touch and a kind word. Children who needed her. Someone actually needed her. Slowly, Astrid reached out and placed her bloodied, work-roughened hand in Ragnar's calloused palm. "Yes," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, I will come with you." The departure. Within the hour, Astrid's few possessions were packed, and she was mounted behind Ragnar on his massive grey warhorse. The animal's warmth seeped into her through her thin cloak, and she had to grip Ragnar's fur mantle to keep from falling. As they rode away from Olaf Grimson's trading post, Astrid looked back one final time. The merchant stood in his doorway, clutching Fenris' tooth with both hands, his face twisted in an expression halfway between triumph and uncertainty, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just done. "Good," Astrid thought, with surprising fierceness. Let him wonder. Let him realize that he traded away something irreplaceable for a hunk of metal that will never love him, never care for him, never give him anything but the weight of his own greed. "Are you afraid?" Ragnar asked quietly, as they rode into the deep pine forests. Astrid considered the question honestly. "Yes," she admitted. "But I've been afraid for so long that it's become normal. At least now I'm afraid while moving toward something unknown, rather than afraid while trapped in something horrible." She felt Ragnar nod. "That's brave," he said. "Braver than many warriors I've known." They rode in silence for several minutes before Astrid gathered the courage to ask the question burning in her mind. "Your wife, how did she die?" Ragnar's body tensed slightly, and for a moment Astrid regretted asking. But then he spoke, his voice rough with old grief. "Childbirth. Our 3rd child. A daughter. She survived 4 days before her fever took her. The baby lived, but Sigrid—" He stopped, his throat working. "She was the light in our home. When she died, that light went out." "I'm sorry," Astrid whispered, meaning it deeply. "So am I." Ragnar paused, then continued. "My children they're good children, but they're hurting. They need someone who can give them what I cannot. They need a mother's love. I know I have no right to ask that of you, especially after all you've suffered." "What are their names?" Astrid interrupted gently. She felt Ragnar smile. "Bjorn is the eldest, 7 winters old, serious, responsible, tries so hard to be strong. Freya is 5, wild as a storm, laughs like bells, cries like thunder. And Eric is 3, still a baby in so many ways, though he tries to be tough like his brother. As Ragnar described his children, Astrid felt something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. It took her several moments to recognize the feeling. Hope. Perhaps the gods hadn't cursed her with barrenness as punishment. Perhaps they had simply known that her destiny lay not in birthing children of her own body, but in mothering children of her heart. Perhaps her womb was empty, so her arms could be full. The first meeting. Ragnar's homestead appeared through the forest like something from a saga tale. It sat in a protected valley, sheltered by tall pines and ancient oaks, with a clear stream running nearby. The longhouse itself was well built from sturdy timber, with a thatched roof and carved dragon heads at each end that seemed to watch over the land. Smoke rose from the central hearth, and Astrid could see small figures moving around outside. Children playing while an elderly woman watched them from the doorway. "That's Asa," Ragnar explained as they approached. "My mother. She's been caring for the children since Sigrid died, but her health is failing. She can barely walk anymore, though she refuses to admit it." As they dismounted, 3 small figures came running, 2 boys and a girl, all with their father's honey-colored hair and their mother's delicate features. But they stopped short when they saw Astrid, their excitement turning to uncertainty. "Children," Ragnar said gently, kneeling to their level, "this is Astrid. She's come to live with us and help take care of you. Can you introduce yourselves?" The eldest boy stepped forward, his young face trying hard to look stern and grown up. "I'm Bjorn Ragnarsson," he said formally. "I'm 7 winters old. I can already use a practice sword, and I help father with the animals." "I'm very pleased to meet you, Bjorn," Astrid said softly, struck by how much sadness lived behind this little boy's eyes too old for his young face. The girl pushed forward next, less formal, but eyeing Astrid with open suspicion. "I'm Freya, Ragnar's daughter, and I'm 5, and I can climb to the top of the tallest oak, and I'm not afraid of wolves or trolls or anything." "That's very brave," Astrid said, noticing how the girl's dress was dirty and torn, her blonde hair tangled and uncombed. A pang went through her heart. This child was trying so hard to be strong, to not need anyone. The smallest boy hung back, one thumb in his mouth, staring at Astrid with huge, uncertain eyes. He was thin, almost fragile-looking, and his clothes hung loose on his small frame. "This is Eric," Ragnar said quietly, reaching back to gently urge his youngest forward. "He doesn't talk much since his mother died. The vulva says the grief locked his voice away." Little Eric shuffled forward a few steps, but would come no closer. His enormous eyes remained fixed on Astrid with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that broke her heart completely. Astrid slowly knelt down to the little boy's level, making herself smaller, less threatening. "Hello, Eric," she said in the gentlest voice she possessed. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." "That's perfectly fine. I'm just happy to meet you." The boy's thumb remained in his mouth, but something shifted in his expression. The grandmother, Asa, emerged from the longhouse, leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. She was ancient, perhaps 70 winters or more, with silver hair, bent back, but eyes that were still sharp as any warrior's blade. She studied Astrid from head to foot with an expression that gave nothing away. "So this is her," the old woman said in Norse dialect, so thick Astrid could barely understand. "The barren one you traded your greatest treasure for." "Mother," Ragnar began warningly. "Peace, boy. I'm not criticizing." Asa shuffled closer, still examining Astrid like a horse trader at market. I'm just noting facts. She's barren, yes? That's what you said. Can't bear children of her own. Yes, Astrid answered for herself, lifting her chin despite the shame that wanted to bow her head. The gods closed my womb. I cannot give birth. Good, Asa said bluntly. Everyone stared at her in shock. The old woman shrugged. Childbirth kills more women than battle kills warriors. It killed my beautiful Sigrid, killed her as surely as any sword. These three little ones need a mother, not another grave to weep over. She reached out with surprising speed and grabbed Astrid's hands, turning them over to examine the palms. She saw the work-roughened skin, the fresh cuts from the pottery, the old scars from years of hard labor. She reached out with surprising speed and grabbed Astrid's hands, turning them over to examine the palms. She saw the work-roughened skin, the fresh cuts from the pottery, the old scars from years of hard labor. These are working hands, Asa pronounced. Good. This household needs work, not decoration. She released Astrid's hands and pointed her walking stick at each child in turn. Bjorn needs someone to tell him it's all right to be a child sometimes, instead of trying to be a man at 7. Freya needs someone to teach her that being strong doesn't mean pushing everyone away. And little Eric. Her voice softened as she looked at the youngest child. Eric needs someone patient enough to wait for his voice to come back. Can you be those things, girl? Astrid felt tears prickling her eyes. For the first time in years, maybe ever, someone was asking her what she could give, rather than lamenting what she couldn't produce. I will try my absolute hardest, she promised. Then you'll do, Asa declared. Now come inside before we all freeze. Bjorn, fetch more firewood. Freya, help me prepare the evening meal. Eric, you show Astrid where she'll sleep. The first night, the inside of the longhouse was warm and smoky, lit by firelight and oil lamps. It was a proper Viking home. One large central room with a hearth in the middle, sleeping quarters curtained off at each end, storage areas and workspaces. But it was also clear that this was a household struggling without a woman's hand. Clothing lay in messy piles. Dirty dishes were stacked haphazardly. The children's sleeping area looked chaotic, with tangled blankets and scattered toys. Little Eric tugged gently on Astrid's skirt and led her to a small curtained alcove near the children's sleeping area. This was Mother's weaving room, Ragnar explained quietly. We've prepared it for you. It's small, but private, and you'll be close if the children need you in the night. The space was indeed small, just large enough for a sleeping pallet, a small chest, and a wooden stool. But it had a tiny window that let in light, and someone had left a handful of dried meadowsweet flowers on the pillow, a welcoming gift. It's perfect, Astrid said honestly. Thank you. That night, after a simple meal of stew and bread, Astrid helped Asa wash the dishes while Ragnar worked on repairing a broken axe handle. The children played with carved wooden toys near the fire, their laughter a sweet sound that filled the longhouse with life. But as bedtime approached, the energy changed. Freya began fidgeting, her earlier bravado cracking. Bjorn's young face grew tight with anxiety, and little Eric's eyes filled with tears that he struggled to hold back. They're afraid of the dark, Asa explained quietly. Ever since Sigrid died, every night is a battle to get them to sleep. Astrid watched the three children trying so hard to be brave, trying not to show their fear, and her heart swelled with protective love so fierce it startled her. May I try something? She asked. At Ragnar's nod, Astrid went to the children. Who would like to hear a story before sleep? She asked gently. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her with desperate hope. Within minutes, All three children were nestled around her on the furs near the fire. Bjorn sitting close, but trying to maintain his grown-up dignity, Freya curled against Astrid's side, and little Eric actually in her lap, his head resting against her chest. Astrid told them a story her grandmother had told her once, a tale of the goddess Freya and her magical cats, of adventures and bravery and love. She made her voice soft and soothing, adding funny voices for different characters that made Freya giggle and even brought a tiny smile to Eric's solemn face. Halfway through the story, she began gently combing her fingers through Freya's tangled hair, working out the knots with patient tenderness. The little girl's eyes started to droop. By the time the story ended, all three children were drowsy and relaxed. For the first time in 2 years, Ragnar later told her, they went to their sleeping pallets without tears or struggles, and little Eric, who hadn't spoken in months, whispered one tiny word as Astrid tucked the furs around him. Mama. The first weeks, the early days were not easy. Astrid woke each morning before dawn, just as she had at Olaf's, but now her labor had purpose beyond mere survival. She learned the rhythms of the household, when to bank the fire for the night, how Ragnar liked his morning porridge prepared, which chores Asa could still manage despite her failing health. She mended the children's clothing, organized the chaotic storage areas, and now slowly began transforming the longhouse from a place of survival into a home. But more importantly, she learned the children. Bjorn, she discovered, carried the weight of the world on his 7-year-old shoulders. He believed he had to be the man of the house when his father was away, had to protect his siblings, had to never show weakness. He woke with nightmares most nights, but refused to cry or ask for comfort. Astrid began sitting with him in the evenings, teaching him to whittle small toys from wood, a skill her own father had taught her. As they worked together in companionable silence, Bjorn gradually began to talk about his mother, about his fears, about the crushing responsibility he felt. You're allowed to still be a child, Bjorn, Astrid told him gently one evening. Being brave doesn't mean never being afraid or sad. It means feeling those things and continuing anyway. Your mother would want you to play, to laugh, to just be 7 years old sometimes. The boy's careful composure cracked, and he cried in her arms for the first time since his mother's death. Deep, wrenching sobs that had been locked inside for 2 years. Freya was different. The 5-year-old had built walls of wildness and bravado, claiming she didn't need anyone, didn't miss her mother, didn't care about anything. She was reckless to the point of danger, climbing too high, wandering too far, as if daring the world to finish breaking her. Astrid never told her to stop. Instead, she simply began following, always within sight but never interfering. When Freya climbed her favorite oak, Astrid would sit at the base with sewing or herb work, available if needed, but not hovering. One afternoon, Freya fell. Not far, but far enough to be frightened and scraped. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, blood on her knee. Astrid was there in seconds, gathering the sobbing child into her arms. "You're all right, little warrior," she murmured. "You're so brave. It's all right to cry when you're hurt." "Mother would say I was being stupid," Freya choked out between sobs. "She would be angry." "Your mother loved you," Astrid said firmly. "And I promise you, wherever she is, she's only worried about you being safe, not angry about a few scrapes." She cleaned Freya's wounds gently, applied healing salve, and for the first time, the fierce little girl let down her walls completely, crying not just from physical pain, but from 2 years of buried grief. And Eric, sweet, silent Eric. The 3-year-old followed Astrid everywhere like a shadow, never speaking, but always present. He had panic attacks if she left his sight for too long, his breathing becoming rapid and tears flowing silently down his cherubic face. Astrid never pushed him to talk. Instead, she began narrating everything she did. "I'm going to get water from the stream now, Eric. Would you like to come with me?" "Good, I'll fill this bucket. The water is cold today. Can you help me carry these herbs back?" "Thank you. You're such a good helper." Slowly, Eric began to respond, not with words, but with nods, head shakes, and small gestures. He started helping with household tasks, his tiny hands trying to fold cloth or arrange herbs under Astrid's patient guidance. One morning, she was grinding grain when Eric appeared at her elbow with a wooden cup. "Water?" he asked clearly, his first real word in months. Astrid's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice calm and warm. "Yes, my darling. Thank you for asking. Let's get you some water." By the second month, Eric was speaking regularly, his vocabulary expanding daily, as if a dam had finally broken. The healing. As the children began to heal, so did Astrid. For years, she had defined herself by what she couldn't do. Couldn't bear children, couldn't satisfy her husband, couldn't meet her family's expectations. She had believed herself worthless, defective, cursed by the gods. But here, in this wild northern valley, she discovered new truths. She couldn't give birth, but she could mother with a depth of love that astounded her. Every time she braided Freya's hair, bandaged Bjorn's scraped knees, or sang Eric to sleep, she was being exactly the mother these children needed. She couldn't produce heirs for a family legacy, but she could create a home filled with warmth and laughter and safety. She couldn't fulfill societal expectations of womanhood, but she could be fully, completely herself, valued not for her womb, but for her heart. Asa noticed the changes first. "You're different than when you arrived," the old woman observed one evening while they spun wool together. "You hold your head higher, smile more. The shadows are leaving your eyes." "I feel different," Astrid admitted. "For the first time in my life, I feel necessary. Like I matter." "You matter because you choose to," Isa said wisely. "Those children don't need your womb. They need your heart, and you're giving it freely." She paused, then added quietly, "So is my son." Astrid's hands stilled on her spindle. "I don't understand." Asa gave her a knowing look. "My boy watches you, girl. The way he watched Sigrid in the early days of their marriage. Like you're the light at dawn after a long, terrible night." "He's just grateful," Astrid began. "He's falling in love," Asa interrupted firmly. "And unless I'm an old fool who's lost her sight along with her strong legs, so are you." The truth of love, Astrid couldn't deny it. Ragnar had become important to her, essential, even. She noticed everything about him. How he was gentle with his children despite his warrior's strength. How he helped with household tasks without being asked. How his laugh, rare as it was, made something warm bloom in her chest. He treated her not as a servant or slave, but as a partner. He asked her opinion on matters from children's discipline to trade negotiations. He thanked her for her work. He noticed when she was tired and insisted she rest. And sometimes, late at night when everyone else slept, they would sit by the dying fire and talk, really talk, about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. One evening, after a particularly good day when all three children had laughed together, Ragnar turned to her. "Astrid," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began racing. When I traded Fenris' tooth for you, I told myself it was only for the children. They needed a mother, and you needed rescue. It was practical, logical. He paused, staring into the flames. But that was a lie, I told myself, because I was afraid to admit the truth. What truth? Astrid whispered. Ragnar finally looked at her, and his ice-blue eyes were full of emotion. When I saw you in that trading house, hurt and afraid but still with your dignity intact, still kind when you had every reason to be bitter, I felt something I thought had died with Sigrid. I felt possibility. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her work-roughened hand in his calloused one. I'm not saying this to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. You're free here, always. You can leave if you wish, though it would devastate me and the children. But I need you to know. He took a deep breath. I love you, Astrid Bjorn's daughter, not as a convenient caretaker for my children, not as a placeholder for my dead wife, but as yourself, for your strength, your gentleness, your capacity to love children who aren't yours by blood as fiercely as if they were. Tears streamed down Astrid's face. Ragnar, I'm barren. I can never give you more children. I don't want more children, he interrupted gently. I have 3 perfect ones who love you as much as I do. What I want is you, as my wife, truly, as my partner, if you'll have me. Astrid looked around the longhouse, at the children sleeping peacefully for the first time in years, at the home she had helped create, at the life she had built from the ashes of her worst nightmare. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. I love you too, Ragnar. So much it frightens me. He smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his scarred, weathered face into something beautiful, and leaned forward to kiss her with a tenderness that made her soul sing. The full life. 5 years later, the homestead in the Northern Valley had become known throughout the region as a place of healing, joy, and unconventional family bonds. Astrid's garden had expanded dramatically. Rows upon rows of medicinal herbs, vegetables, and flowers that supplied not just their household, but half the valley. She had become renowned as a healer, combining her grandmother's knowledge with Nordic herbal wisdom learned from Asa before the old woman passed peacefully in her sleep 2 years ago. People traveled for days to seek Astrid's remedies and counsel, bringing trade goods and stories from across the Viking territories. The household prospered not through Ragnar's warrior skills alone, but through Astrid's medicines and wisdom. Bjorn, now 12 winters old, had grown tall and strong, training in warrior skills with his father, but also learning healing arts with Astrid, a combination that made him unique and valuable. He moved through life with confidence rather than crushing responsibility, able to be both strong and vulnerable. Freya, 10 winters old, was as wild as ever, but now channeled that wildness into helping her mother gather rare herbs from dangerous places, learning to climb and explore with purpose rather than reckless desperation. She wanted to be a trader like her father, traveling far and wide, and both Ragnar and Astrid supported her dreams. Eric, now 8 years old, had become the homestead's resident storyteller, his voice, once locked by grief, now rich and expressive. He could hold audiences spellbound with tales passed down through generations, and visitors often requested his stories around the fire. The unexpected visitor. It was a cool autumn day when a merchant caravan passed through, seeking to trade with Ragnar. Among the merchants was a face Astrid never thought she'd see again. Her brother. Bjorn Thorson, her younger brother, was now a man of 20 winters, a merchant himself, traveling the trade routes. He didn't recognize Astrid at first. She had changed too much from the broken, desperate woman who had left their family's farm. But she recognized him. "Bjorn," she said quietly. He looked up from his trade goods, confusion crossing his face, then shock as recognition struck. "Astrid? Is it really you?" They stood in awkward silence until Astrid's children, curious about the visitor, came running out. Freya grabbed Astrid's hand possessively, while Bjorn and Eric flanked her protectively. "These are your children?" her brother asked in disbelief. "They are," Astrid confirmed, squeezing Freya's hand. "These are my treasures." Her brother's eyes filled with tears. "Astrid, I've spent 5 years searching for you. Mother and father, they've been drowning in guilt. They never forgave themselves for what they did. Father died last winter, calling your name on his deathbed. Mother lives, but barely. She wants to see you, to beg your forgiveness. Stop!" Astrid held up her hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Tell Mother I forgive them. I truly do. What they did was terrible, but it led me here, to this family, to this life, to a purpose I never could have found any other way." She looked at Ragnar, who was watching from the doorway, at her 3 beloved children, at the home and garden and life she had built. "Tell Mother I'm not the barren, worthless daughter anymore. I'm Astrid Eriksson, wife to a warrior, mother to 3 incredible children, healer to this valley. Tell her that her curse was actually my blessing, that my empty womb meant I could fill my arms with children who needed me." She smiled, genuine and free. "Tell her I'm happy." Her brother wept openly, torn between joy at seeing her thriving and grief at the years lost. Before he left, Astrid gave him a small package of medicinal herbs. "For Mother," she explained, "for her aching joints and old sorrows. And tell her I understand why they did it. Desperation makes people do desperate things. I forgive them completely." The final wisdom. That night, after the children were asleep and the household was quiet, Ragnar found Astrid in her garden, sitting on the wooden bench he had built for her last spring. "Are you all right?" he asked, settling beside her. "I'm perfect," she said honestly. "I spent so many years believing I was cursed, defective, worthless. But I wasn't cursed at all. I was just not meant for the life I thought I should have. I was meant for this one." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and pine needles. "And home. They sold me for 300 pieces of silver, thinking I was worthless. You traded a priceless sword for me, thinking I could help your children, but the truth is—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Neither price was right. Because I'm not worth silver or swords or anything that can be traded. I'm worth exactly what every person is worth. My kindness, my love, my presence, my care. The right to choose my own path and define my own value." Ragnar kissed the top of her head. "The children are worried you'll leave with your brother. I told them you wouldn't. But—" "Leave?" Astrid looked up at him in genuine surprise. "Why would I leave? Everything I love is here. This is my home. You are my family." From the longhouse came a small voice. "Eric, having a nightmare." Without hesitation, both Astrid and Ragnar rose and headed inside to comfort him, moving as the partnership they had become. As Astrid gathered the sleepy 8-year-old into her arms, singing the lullaby she had created just for him, she felt the weight of complete peace settle over her. She had been sold like cattle. She had been barren and shamed. She had been rejected and worthless. But she had also been saved. She had also found purpose. She had also discovered that the greatest families are built not from blood, but from choice, commitment, and love freely given. And in the end, that made her the richest woman in all the Northern Territories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating stories about history's greatest figures and events.